Bob, in the consulting firm, you were telling me a little bit about the consulting firm and you're basically innovating products all day. Like
Yeah.
what specifically is your role like when you go into a company like SpaceX or
Or
whoever it is?
so most of the time, what we're wrestling with is that they might either have a product or they have an idea or they have a technology, but they don't know how to activate it in the marketplace. And so
Mm.
for us, what we do is the first place we start is by interviewing people around what causes people to say today's the day they need a new something. Like so, if it's like working for a CRM company, it'd be like, okay, let's talk to 5 people who recently bought your product and say what in the world was going on in their business that made them say today was the day that they needed this thing, and why in the world did they fire their old thing, and what did they have, and what progress were they hoping to make along the way. And then what we'll do is we'll actually go interview 5 people who bought somebody else. And out of that, we actually understand what we call the demand side, which is what causes people to say today's the day they need to buy something new, and what are their hiring criteria, and what are their firing criteria, and what are they looking for, and what promises are they looking for. And so ultimately, it's very different than features and benefits. And ultimately, what you think is your competition isn't your competition. So for example, think of Snickers and Milky Way, right? Most people would think they compete with each other. They're both candy bars. They're both made by the same company. They both sit next to each other on the aisle. But when you actually go to eat a Snickers, it competes with a sandwich and a coffee and a Red Bull, but it never competes with a Milky Way. And when you think of a Milky Way, it might actually compete with an ice cream or a brownie or a glass of wine, but it's not competing with a Snickers. And so you start to realize like most competition is set up because of the industry structure you're in, but that doesn't mean that it actually is who your competition is in your consumer's eyes. And so you start to realize that what the reasons why people do things is actually very much more complicated and way more connected through space and time. And so most people, they'll say, oh yeah, I had an impulse purchase for a mattress. I did this interview the other day where somebody said, oh God, I needed a new mattress. I finally bought one. And then I asked the question, so how long haven't you been able to sleep? And they go, oh, that's been years. So they've really been looking for years. They just didn't realize that they found the right time and the right space to actually buy the thing. And ultimately, like nothing is random, everything is caused. And so that's kind of where we start, is helping people see the demand for what it really is and where it really lies. And ultimately, 9 times out of 10, the product that most people have is over-engineered, and that's something that half as good will actually kill twice as better.
Yeah. Is there a framework for I would say like the questions or the interviews? Like
Yep.
what are you trying to extract out of by asking the questions?
So again, the framework that we use, there's 2 frameworks we use. One framework is called the forces of progress, and that there are 4 forces that act upon people to change. Like the first thing to realize is we are all creatures of habit, and we would prefer to do the same thing we did yesterday over and over again. But it's only when we have a struggling moment do we start to decide that we need to do something different. And so ultimately, as that struggling moment actually creates the space in the brain for a solution to fall into. Without a struggling moment, you can't even see most products that are on the shelf. And so part of it is then what we do is we interview people to understand what was pushing them, what was going on with the old way that basically said like, this isn't going to work anymore. And then we ask, like, as they looked at the new product, what were they hoping for? What could they do? What did they think they were able to do that they couldn't do today? And then we talk about the anxieties. What were they worried about? And what are the habits that they had to give up in order to make that progress? And so ultimately, we're studying people who changed. And out of that, we can then understand kind of the process of how they changed. And then we can replicate that process for every one person who made it. There's 10, 100, 1,000,000 behind them who want to make it but don't know how.
So once you've gathered that, which is amazing, by the way, because I was reading, I actually have your learning to build book right here. Yeah. And I was learning in there obviously the skill sets of innovators, and one of them being uncovering the demand, emotional, the functional, and social. Yeah. Cues. So yeah, could you go into that a little bit?
So if you think about the energy required to change, right? Like to stop doing something you know how to do and find a new way to do something and learn that new way requires energy. And so you have to actually start to realize, like, where does that energy come from? And it typically comes from 3 different sources. One is what we call functional energy. It's too hard to do. It takes too long. There's too many steps. Mechanically, it's just too much to remember. Like, those are all functional things that, like, if I can give you an easier way to do it, you're going to take it, right? The second one is emotional. You might be frustrated, or like, it might be too slow, but ultimately too slow is going to make your boss think you're not doing enough, and you're worried that you're going to get fired, right? And so part of this is to realize that every set of actions have interdependencies between social, emotional, and functional. And if we just look at it from the functional realm, we miss the emotional and social realms. And you realize that most people don't buy a car just to get from point A to point B, because if that was the case, everybody would buy a Chevy. But the reality is Mercedes still sells a lot of cars, and it has nothing to do with about getting point A to point B. It has to be about reliability, or it has to be about what I want my neighbors to think, or other things around it. And so part of it is being able to understand what are the real sources of energy that cause people to change. And it falls into those three categories when we're interviewing. The other thing I would say is that this is, from a marketing perspective, this is actually not marketing at all. I call this product research, not market research, because at some point in time, this is about, and to be honest, it's really consumer research. But ultimately, the whole method that I learned and kind of created is based on criminal and intelligence interrogation. Because most people lie to you, and they lie to themselves of why they did stuff. I bought the house because it's the kitchen, and it's not the kitchen at all. And so part of this is you have to learn how to dig past what I call the pablum, the words that make everybody say, oh yeah, that's right, I get it. But the reality is, like, it doesn't mean anything. So when people say, oh yeah, well, it's more convenient, what does that mean? What do you mean more convenient? And it turns out there's 22 dimensions to convenient. And which one of the 4 are you really talking about instead of the 22? And you start to realize, like, most people only think about certain things, but they use very high level words, but you want to actually get to the underlying causation. What has to happen for them to want to make progress? Okay, so then we will do the interviews. We'll actually then look for, instead of looking at all 10 interviews, we'll usually do 10 or 12. But instead of looking at the interviews as a group, we actually look at them as individuals, and then we combine the ones that are similar. So instead of trying to find the themes across them, we're actually trying to find the pathways to say, oh, these people started here and went there. These other people started somewhere else and went somewhere else. And you start to see the vectors of how people make progress. And ultimately, you start to see there's not one reason why people buy from you. There's 3, 4, 5 different reasons. And ultimately, you have to actually adjust your product to fit to those 5 different markets.
That's interesting. How would you, because obviously you're on the product side, how would you help marketing and sales? Like, how would you help them do a better job of, I would say, in the marketing sense, of finding more hand raisers in a sense, and then in the sales perspective?
I want to get to people. Yeah, I want to get to people before they raise their hand. So here's the thing: so again, the struggling moment. So the way Clay would say it is, questions create spaces in the brain for solutions to fall into. So marketing should be actually asking questions with no answers. How'd you sleep last night? What do you hate about your house? All of those questions create a thing in your thing to say, like, you're right, I don't like this, I should do something about it. But we sit there and shout features and benefits. And the reality is, half the time the features and benefits mean nothing, or they're so overblown that they're not believable. And so a real sale starts with a struggling moment. And marketing's job is to actually make me problem aware and begin to have solution aware. But more importantly, make sure the problem is big enough that I can take it on. Yeah. So think of like the Snickers commercial, right? You're not you when you're hungry. Yeah. It starts with, I'm hangry. I'm literally got a lot to do. I can't get this done. Let me eat a Snickers. Oh, I'm back to myself. Mm-hmm. It starts with the struggling moment, and you start to realize. So, for example, I worked with a mattress company, and one of the things we realized is one of the greatest competitors to a mattress is a bottle of ZzzQuil, which is a sleep aid. So we just wrote a little ad that said, how many bottles of ZzzQuil do you need to buy before you realize you need a new mattress? 28% increase in sales.
That's ridiculous,
right?
I love, it's so simple, but I feel like it is
I'll tell you, it's not simple to get to those insights. That's the hard part.
Yes. Yeah. And man, because I feel that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, like, I feel like all of the tactics and everything, like all of the, like, marketing strategies that you see in everything that you see out there. It's like everything works, but then you need to then know how
I actually don't think it works. I don't think it works at all. I think the fact is like here's the thing is my belief is that the problem is that they're being taught wrong. Most marketers are taught correlation, not causation. This correlates with that. Sunglass sales and ice cream go together. Oh, we should put sunglasses and ice cream together. It's all correlation. And so you start to realize that when you start to confuse correlation and causation, you get into big trouble. What happens is then you start to treat everything like a probability. Well, 7 out of 10 people, get through the funnel, and then we get to this, and then it's 4 out of 10 get it, and then it's 2 out of 10. It's like, okay. When I built houses, my whole thing is I went from 1,000 leads a month to 200 leads a month, and I went from 20 closes with 1,000 to 80 closes on 200. And so you start to realize that most people in marketing think that part of this problem is more leads is better. More leads is not better. More leads is more work. And I want to know who's ready for me. I don't need to know who's just kicking tires, because kicking tires is important, but that's marketing's job, not my job. And so I've had the role of product. I've had the role of sales. I've had the role of marketing. I've had the role of CEO. I've had all these different roles. And ultimately, it's about causation, not correlation.
Interesting. So in that sense, would you define, I would say so are you familiar with CRMs and like pipeline stages and things?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it would be interesting to see how you how you create the pipeline stages. Are you doing it based on buyer indicators?
I'm doing it based on where they are in their buying timeline. Are they in passive looking? Are they in active looking? Are they in deciding? Are they actually in first use? And so my thing is and ultimately I have several B2B businesses I run, and when we sit down with salespeople, all we talk about is what's causing them to actually start to look for this product. And if they can't answer it, then they're passive looking. And ultimately they have to tell me the forces that are at play in their business that would say today's the day they're going to do it. Otherwise, they don't even get into the funnel. This is where we talk about total addressable market as just the number of people in the market. But the reality is that's not the total addressable market. How many people in that market are struggling? Because only strugglers can actually look for the new product. So I might have 1 million new businesses, but if there's only 100,000 that are struggling, the TAM is only 100,000. It's not 1 million.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm an anomaly, my friend. I kind of warned you, but I don't think about it in a very normal way.
Which is beautiful, because I think that's what it takes to I think it takes that anomaly way of thinking in order to make change for the better, in a marketing perspective and sales perspective, and just overall driving more revenue for a company. Like it takes that thinking in order to make things more efficient and more effective, and really challenging the norm. It's like, well, why are we sending out this thing to them when they're not asking for us to send out this thing to them? And so, and it's just,
by the way, it's the right question. But the answer you get is like, well, what else are we supposed to do? And that's the thing is because you don't know why they're looking, and you think it's about the kitchen, all you can do is talk about the kitchen, but it has nothing to do with the kitchen of why they're buying the house, right?
Yeah.
It has to be the fact so one of the assumptions when I went into building houses was the assumption was like, nobody looks for a used house and a new house, a new build. New build people are different. They only look for new build. It's just a lie. It's a lie we told ourselves. They look at used just as much. And what I end up doing is figuring out how to compete with the used market by having specs ready to go that I could finish in 6 weeks, that literally had a 9-foot plate or a 10-foot plate as opposed to an 8-foot plate, and cost the same as basically a used house. Sold them like they were going out of style.
Yeah. That's so amazing. What year did you do the construction company?
2004 to 2008.
Oh, wow.
So, and to be honest, in late 2007, we lost. I mean, I couldn't close a mortgage. I couldn't close I had 37 homes I had to close. I couldn't close them because there was a moratorium at Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae that literally wouldn't let any new home mortgages be done in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, that's nuts.
So
that's freaking. Is that the last time you touched real estate?
No, I actually went and worked for the banks to help them to tell them what to go build on the land they got back from all the other builders. So I built an algorithm to say, like, if you have this lot and it's in this area, you should build this house at this price with this square footage. And what I did is I told them, if it doesn't sell within 60 days of being up, I'll carry the cover costs. And I did, I want to say like 4,000 or 5,000 homes that way, and I never had to cover anything.
Yeah,
it was about helping them get rid of land.
Yeah, it would be so interesting to be just like a fly on the wall when you're working. Like, and this fly eventually, this fly occasionally like asks you like, wait, why are you doing that?
By the way, I have people do that. I literally have people who work with me that's what their job is to say, like, okay, we call it game on, game off, right? They say game off. What the hell are you thinking about right now? I'm like, well, I'm really connecting this and this and this with that and that and that. And they're like, wait, huh? And so I end up, so every room has whiteboards in it because that's what they do is they just they don't, I say slow me down. They don't slow me down. They literally have helped me take what I do naturally and turn it into processes. So that's why I have people around me all the time asking me why I'm thinking what I'm doing or what am I doing and why am I doing stuff. Because I don't even know how to do that. I don't even know why I do it that way. I can tell you what I'm thinking, but the hard part is I can't tell you why I think that way. I just can't.
Yeah. Can you talk to your, I want to say like systems thinking that, I want to say like that framework that you laid out and learning to build to where it's the inputs and actions that go into the system that give the outputs and then the outcomes?
Yeah. So the way I'm going to do it this way, if that's all right, I'm just going to switch over
to
the screen and that's all right. And so typically what happens is I'm going to go like this, just get rid of that. And so we have, most people think about a system, right? And that system has some outputs. And those outputs go to some customer or consumer. And that customer or consumer has some outcome. And the system has inputs. But it also is usually filled with functions or actions. And so the first thing I do is I frame or map. And when I go this way, when I go right to left, what happens here is that I understand the customer, I understand the outcomes they're looking for. Is like, what outputs do I need to deliver to help that customer make these outcomes? And then ultimately these outcomes or outputs, what systems do I need to put together? What functions do I need to put together? And what inputs do I need to make sure I get to these outputs? And so ultimately, so the way that I think about this is, so I recently have lost about 100 pounds, right? And so you could say I was 300 pounds and I went to 200 pounds, right? And ultimately, I've been 300 pounds pretty much my whole adult life. But what made me change was the fact that I wanted to ski with my kids, right? And that, to be honest, I will only see my kids now once a quarter or maybe even hopefully once a month. But the fact is, at the time I started thinking about this, I said, if I die when my mom dies and I only have 7 years left, I'm only going to see my kids 28 more times in my life. And I said, that's unacceptable. And so I said, all right, how do I go spend more time with my kids? So I said, I want to go ski with them. That'll be fun. And so that's the reason why I lost the weight. I didn't lose the weight to be healthier. I didn't lose the weight to be all these other things that people want to do. But ultimately, what I had to do is I had to actually work on 3 different systems. One was my sleep system, one was my eating system, and one was my exercise system. And ultimately, I started to get new outputs, which were my glucose levels. I bought an Oura ring that basically told me how well I slept, right? I ended up getting a doctor that actually gave me kind of all my different blood tests on my A1C and all these different things going on. And then ultimately, I go back to my inputs and I say, all right, the first thing I worked on was sleep. Well, how many hours do I get? What if I go from, I used to get 4.5 to 5 hours. Now I get 8 hours. What happens? What about my routine when I go to sleep? What about Basically, what supplements do I take before I go to sleep? What about the temperature of the room? I start to realize there's all these causation things that make me have better sleep. Once I have more sleep, I actually have more energy. And so then I start working on exercise. And so first thing I do is I buy a Peloton, and I basically just start doing simple exercises. But Peloton is not going to get me ready for skiing. So then I hire a trainer, and I do a trainer for basically 3 times a week to help me get all of my muscles in line so I can get the training going. I then basically also start to swim Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That helped me do this. So I go from basically 300. My sleep alone got me from 300 to 260. Mm-hmm. When I started to exercise, I got down to about 220. And then I started to work about eating. I love to eat. So it was one of those things where and I love to drink. So it was one of those things where I was drinking a lot and eating a lot. And it was like, okay, let me do that in spite of all that. And then I just found fasting. And so now I fast from 2 to, my eating window is from 2 to 8. Otherwise, I don't eat anything. Water or just water pretty much. And for the most part, that's what's got me down to 193. And to be honest, I'll have 30 days of skiing in this year. I had 30 days of skiing in last year.
Yeah.
And so the whole point is the systems thinking, the thinking about outcomes to outputs to systems to what inputs do I play to get to these outcomes or to the output, the outcome. Ultimately, that's how I think about everything. There isn't a thing in the world I don't think about this way. And ultimately, most people are saying, I need to weigh myself all the time. But if I actually know how much exercise I do, I know I get my 10,000 steps in, I literally get an hour and a half of REM and I get an hour and a half of deep, and I literally stay in my fasting windows, I don't even have to step on the scale. So this is what I was taught when I was 18 years old by these guys. By all my mentors. They taught me how to be a systems thinker and how to think about things. And what we call this is right to left thinking. And what's interesting is if I do it from inputs to system and output, that's actually called process mapping. And most people can map a process, but when you create, we create from right to left. We don't create from left to right. Oh, sorry. I get the wrong. Sorry. I was doing this. We think right to left. Like when you create right to left, but when you actually build something out, you create from a process perspective, you create it left to right. And so this is the thing where most people try to think of things this way. I actually think of things the exact opposite way. So that's the whole point, is that context. The context that people are in adds value. And most marketers try to destroy the context and literally say, like, this product works no matter what. And it's just wrong. Most people have a understanding of the situation they're in and that they need help. And we don't actually, as marketers, talk about that. We just talk about, you can be better if you buy this. As opposed to like, hey, if this is happening to you, we can help you. The thing that's so crazy is most people, if you can articulate to them a problem that they have, that they can't really articulate well, and you can articulate it better, they automatically assume you know how to solve it.
I went through a Coursera class to get Google certified to just understand like what Google teaches when it comes to marketing.
Yeah.
And they didn't talk about anything on the consumer side. At most they talked about features and benefits and like, oh, you have to understand the benefits that come along with, your product to the consumer. And so like, why do you think this piece is so like as important as this piece is? Like, why do you think it's missed in education?
Because it's hard.
It's hard.
It's very hard. And to be honest, what they would say is that's really psychology. That's really, research. That's really, so in marketing's world, marketing is about actually building the messaging. And to be honest, it's more about the pushing out of the messaging and the metrics around messaging, as opposed to kind of really understanding what customers want. It's almost like knowing what customers want is an input to marketing. It's not marketing's job.
Makes sense.
And so my question is, whose job is it then? Because if it's not theirs, right?
I would assume either third-party consultants like yourself or R&D department.
Yeah, and my thing is it should be the entire organization. But yes.
Yeah. That's amazing. Dang, man. I'm like,
So
I'm kind of,
you're just so you know, you're touching the tip of the iceberg. This thing goes very deep, and it's very big.
yeah, I could imagine. Man, I just want to learn all of this.
So let me give you some names. April
Yeah.
Dunford. You got to look her up.
Mm-hmm.
That is. The other one you got to look up is Claire Sulentrope and Gia. They have a company called Forget the Funnel.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Singer. He has a thing called Shape Up. He's more on the technical side, but like all of these people, we've all been kind of working together and doing different things for many years, and there's just a huge body of work around this.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So it's deep, and it's not the mainstream. It's not like what you're going to find on Coursera or you're going to find in kind of the traditional places. You're going to find it is kind of like on the fringes of. And to be honest, most of us spend our time in startup world because at some point it's just easier to educate people right from the beginning than it is to try to retrain people who think they already know it all.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Man, yeah. It's so interesting. Like so many my brain is doing its best to follow along and process everything that you're talking about. That's why sometimes I have like quiet moments because I'm just trying to process.
Well, I have a friend who literally hires me every year to give the exact same talk. The same, like he's done it for 8 years straight. And I keep going like, why in the world do you keep, and he goes like, I want to update the talk. He's like, no, he goes, you have to give the same talk because every time you talk, I hear something different. I hear something new. I'm like, how is that possible? He goes like, well, you talk about the time, or you talk about the forces of progress. And to be honest, it blew my mind so much that I didn't even hear the notion of the timeline until the second time we talked about it.
Yeah.
And so part of this is so nested and so deep that you start to realize that there's a lot of different pieces to it. And so this is one of those things where it will take time to kind of register it all. But part of it is the way you got to me is you were struggling with marketing and saying, this is making no sense at all. And that's what caused you to start the whole process to figure out kind of a new way of doing something. And so part of this is you got to think of me as almost like one of the candidates along the way of the shopping trip to say, like, I need to adopt a new way to think about marketing. What am I going to do? Am I going to create my own? Am I going to learn from a bunch of people? Am I going to amalgamate my own thing? But ultimately, you're on the path, or you're on the road to basically figure out a new way to market because you know the way that you've been marketing or the way they've been talking about marketing makes no sense to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Since the beginning too. Ever since I got into real estate, I always questioned one of the big issues in real estate, I want to say residential real estate, the buying and selling of used properties.
Yeah.
One of the big problems that I noticed immediately the first year that I got in, I dropped out of college and I have no business experience at all. And I went to my broker and he always put the numbers on the board and I looked at it and it showed that we had a certain amount of number of real estate agents in the firm.
Yeah.
And then we had a certain amount of transactions. And then in my mind, I'm like, okay, so our goal is to increase the amount of transactions. And then I seen the goal had nothing to do with the transactions, but had everything to do with the real estate agents. And I was like, wait a second, why are we increasing real estate agents instead of transactions? Isn't the reason why real estate agents actually come to firms is because they're looking for transactions? So why not engineer something to acquire transactions instead of real estate agents? You're killing two birds with one stone.
The business model doesn't work that way.
Yes, exactly.
So their business model works is they actually make more money the more agents they have because they get a larger cut of those commissions. And usually most real estate agents in any one firm, 2 or 3 of the agents do 90% of the sales, and virtually every single one.
Yep.
And ultimately they become their own brokers because they realize, why am I paying a broker when I'm doing all the sales? And so it just kind of evolves in that way. And part of it is you have to realize that most people who become agents just want to get out of the house. They just want a place to go. They want a desk. They do 1 or 2 transactions. They make maybe 10, 12, 20 grand a year. They're like, this is great.
Yeah.
But there are the bulk of the agents don't do enough. And it's literally the 1%ers who do 90% of the real estate transactions because they have a system and they know how the system works. And the other part is that most real estate agents know, like, if I list a house, somebody's going to buy it. I don't even have to work hard, but somebody's got to buy it. Mm-hmm. So some people are on the listing side and the other people are on the buying side. Most of the new agents take buyers because they think it's, I can get them to figure out a house, but buyers take a long time to figure out unless you have a strategy. So for example, one of the things we would do is we would actually make buyers go to a wide range of houses of things they didn't want, right? Because everybody only wants to look at houses they want. But what happens is you show them a ranch and they're like, oh my God, look at the basement in this thing, right? They never thought of a ranch. Or you look at an attached condo, it's like, oh my gosh, this is 3 floors. This is kind of amazing, right? And so you start to realize, like, the more they can have experience, the more they can actually start to realize what they want. But most people just try to say, in their mind, we just show them almost what they want, and it's never close enough, and they never buy, and they just get tired. The interesting thing is the number one answer you get is like, how did you pick your house? Is like, yeah, I just got tired and we settled for something. So part of this is, how do you actually help people buy better? That's the real thing. Most people, when they're ready to buy, they're not ready to buy. They're actually desperate to figure out how to get out of their house. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to move to. They haven't done any of the research. And if they have, they've over-researched to the point where there's no choice because it's only the inventory they have on the market today. And so they're always wanting a house they can never have.
Yes.
Which doesn't work either.
Yeah. Interesting.
And so most people just let people bumble through the process. But there are some people who are literally going like, let me tell you how this works. Let me educate you through the process. Let me tell you how we're going to do this. And you can sell them every single time.
Yeah.
But part of it is they have to follow a process. And the process is not the traditional of just going and looking at houses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is being taught to real estate agents by all the brokers and coaches. Oh, show them houses until they pick one and then put them in escrow.
Just show them houses and figure out how to follow up. And so they're automating. The crazy part, the way I describe it is they're just automating the insanity. They're actually not making it any better. They're just making it more efficient to give you more stupid shit.
Yeah.
Sorry. By the way, I can say that, you can't say that because you're in the industry, but outside the industry, they're not going to laugh.
No,
I don't need another fucking email. I just don't.
100%. It's no, it's like so perfect the way you said it. I just made it more efficient.
Like, ooh, we got a 37% open rate. Yeah, I opened it to delete it. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And so okay, where what you start to realize is the leads and marketing and sales have conflict because marketing is all about generating more leads, not necessarily better leads. And sales is all about leads I can close. And so they're always at odds. But if we actually understand the customer and the progress they're trying to make, all of a sudden I can get sales and marketing aligned. And so this is where I actually, like, I've taken organizations and cut the sales team and the marketing team in half and quadrupled sales because the friction isn't there anymore.
Mm-hmm. Marketing and sales are, both aligned. They're both on the same page.
By the way, the only thing they have in common is the customer.
Yes. Yeah. And I think and it's interesting because when you dive into that, I think the difference between marketing and sales is at which stage of the customer's experience they are touching them.
Well, so the way I always say it is a marketer is a salesperson who can't close. Right? They can talk about all the features and we need to add this thing and we can do this, but they're actually afraid of sales. Most marketers are afraid of sales because they don't want the commitment. And so they're doing everything to make it more attractive, but nothing to close the deal. And ultimately, the deal is always made by trade-offs, not by settling, and not by one more feature.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So like when I built houses, 93% of my people said they wanted an Energy Star compliant house. Right? I didn't sell it once. 93% said they wanted it. But when the finished basement was $27,000 and an Energy Star compliant house was $27,000, all of them bought the finished basement, or they didn't buy it at all. But nobody bought the Energy Star compliant house because the payback was 40 years. Ridiculous. Wow. But they all said they wanted it.
Yeah, very interesting.
So my advice to you is to literally go talk to the last 10 people who bought a house and say, tell me your story. Tell me how you went through it. Tell me where the struggling moments were. Tell me where you gave up. Just tell me the story. Don't tell me about the house. Tell me about your experience. And if you do 10 of those, you will have more insights that will drive you for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Because nobody's asking them. And what happens is what you do is you sit down and ask the people who want to buy a house, and they'll tell you, I want granite countertops. I want hardwood floors. I want, stainless steel appliances. I want this. And to be honest, it has nothing to do with why they're buying. Nothing.
Yeah.
It's the excuse they give of why they don't buy, but that's not why they're buying.
Yeah. It's interesting. You hit on something that I struggle with and I feel like I didn't even know until you said it right now, is the reason why I got into marketing, because I used to do sales and I hated it.
Yeah.
And yeah, then I moved.
No, you hate the no.
Yeah.
By the way, there's no in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
There's just more work.
It's so true. Yeah.
My belief is, to be honest, if you actually master this and you master the notion of uncovering demand, you should go back to sales, because you will kill it, because the reference point changes from me trying to sell a house to me just trying to help people buy a home. And when you start to realize that selling is about helping people make progress, it literally is the best job in the world.
Yeah. 100%. You become the ultimate consultant to that.
That's right.
Meeting them where they're at and then helping them get
That's
to where
right.
they need.
And whether it's software sales or real estate sales or anything, everything's about helping people who are struggling.
Right.
Like, you can't convince somebody who doesn't want to buy a house to buy a house. Like, that's the most, by the way, you don't convince them of anything. They convince themselves.
Right.
Right.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because I was going to go into how to basically unlock that. Well, what I was going to go into was from a RevOps perspective of how to, I want to say, productize the research aspect of it. Or does that?
Yeah. Yep. I've done it. I can already tell you how to do it.
And
very simple. You ask them 4 basic questions. Why do you want to move? What's going on right now that says today's the day you need to move? What's pushing you to move? Right? What are you hoping for in your house? Like, as you move to your new house, what is it, something that like a year from now, you'll say, oh my God, my kids can walk to school. Everybody has their own room. We've got a neighborhood where we can actually play with friends who are in the area. Like, what's the outcomes they want? Number 3, what's the anxiety that they have? What are you worried about? How to sell your house? I'm worried about finding it close enough. I'm worried that we can afford it. Like, what are the things they're worried about? And ultimately, what would you miss the most about your existing home if you were to move tomorrow? And if you ask those 4 questions and you basically take those answers and summarize them up and tell them their situation, that will give you 90% of what it takes to sell them. Because nobody takes the time to understand why they want to do it and what they're really looking for.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
I set up a system where people would come in. You want to look at one of our houses? Tell me why you want to move. Tell me what you're worried about. Tell me what you're hoping for. Tell me what you're worried about, and tell me what you're going to miss. And literally, like, if you do that, I will literally go and I'll give you an appointment to meet at my house. Right? This is where I went from 1,000 leads to 200 leads. But the people who literally went through and answered those questions, I could close 80% of them. Because they were ready.
And like you said, they close themselves. Like, it's kind of like...
They close themselves.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the hard part is that what real estate agents don't know how to do usually is how to help them manage the trade-offs between this house and that house. And they're trying to figure out the ideal house, and what they need is... So there's a rule of 3. If you give somebody 3 things, the first thing they do is eliminate one of the 2. Right? Have you heard this? So if I give you A, B, and C, and you look at it and you go like, oh, I don't want the ranch. It's out. He's out. So now it's between A and B. The rational people think that people say they look between A and B and try to go back and forth on it. But that's not what people really do. What they do is they look at A and compare it to C, and they look at B and compare it to C because they have confidence in the C that they made the decision on, and they eliminate the other house. And so they don't actually pick a house, they eliminate the two.
Ah, yes.
And so when you give them one house to look at, they can't make the trade-offs and they can't decide.
Yes.
You need to always show them 3, not 2, 3. Because the one house they don't want becomes the one like, I don't want that house. And it becomes a very confident decision that they don't want that house. And now they can actually base their decision around the reference point of the confidence of C.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't teach that in real estate school at all.
Yeah. They don't teach a lot in real estate school.
They want you to know what a hectoliter is.
Yes.
Or a hectare or whatever it is. And how many hectoliters and how many square feet in an acre? Like,
Is it up? Yeah.
So I do have a hard stop. So we got about 4 minutes.
100%. Bob, I appreciate it. Your brain, I could literally just sit here and listen to you talk and just take notes.
So my thing would be is here's the deal. I want you to take something out of what we talked about. I want you to go do something with it.
Yes.
And then I want to hear back from you about what you did with it.
Yes.
It's that simple. Go interview somebody. Go try the 3 house rules, something like, just go take one little nugget from this conversation. And so before you post it as a podcast, I want you to go do something with it and then talk about how it worked or didn't work.